Shall I go first? I'm Amanda Brand. I'm the branch secretary of Dorset Local Government Branch, and I'm one of the 2 Southwest delegates that sits on the NJC, the National Joint Council. Hello.
Should I go next, because I'm the second regional delegate for the National Joint Committee. Sorry, name's Zoe Rogers. I'm branch secretary at South Somerset Local Government Branch, and I'm also newly appointed joint deputy convener, regional convener.
Hello, I'll introduce myself. My name is Rafe Rawson. Rafe rhymes with safe, for those of you that don't know me. It's the easiest way to remember. I'm a steward at primary school in an academy in the Bournemouth area. I'm also on the Southwest Regional Committee for Education, and then further represent the Southwest region on the National Schools Committee.
I'm Janine Miller. I'm a regional organiser in Dorset for UNISON, and I'm also the Southwest lead for local government, supporting the Southwest Local Government Committee.
Thanks, Janine, and thanks all, and apologies I didn't call you in order there. So without further ado, I'm going to move to our first speaker, who I suspect for many of us will need no introduction at all. Christina McAnea, our newly elected, or still fairly newly elected, General Secretary of UNISON. So welcome, Christina.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks very much, and I'm delighted to be here. Can I just check? Is it sounding echoey again, or does it okay? All right, good. I'm really pleased to be here to be part of your rally this evening. You know, it's been we're meeting at the end of a fairly tumultuous week, or towards the end of it, in which the sort of grubby dealings of, you know, the greedy and the privileged few has rarely been off the front pages, whether that's David Cameron trying to organise access to ministers for his mates, wealthy football clubs seeking to get even richer, or Boris Johnson going out of his way to offer tax breaks to the country's richest man. The whiff of entitlement and sleaze hangs heavy in the air. I feel a bit as if I've been transported back to a couple of decades, when sleaze was almost synonymous with Tories. And you know, I think we should have a new saying. You know, there used to be a joke in the NHS that they would say NFN, not normal for Norfolk. Maybe we ought to have an NFT at some of these things, normal for Tories, when we're talking about sleaze. And you have to contrast that, don't you, with the sort of behaviour of the work that's done by UNISON members, you know, in local government and indeed elsewhere across our public services. The key thing being keeping our communities safe and well. And yet our local government workers in particular continue to be underpaid and undervalued. And you just look at some of the jobs where we've got lowest paid members, and I know tonight you've got a lot of there's people here representing schools, an area that's always been very dear to my heart, as I was once the National Secretary for Education and did a lot of work and set up the UNISON Schools Committee. And the work that our members do in there and in all sorts of services across local government is just invaluable work, but largely, and sadly for many, goes unnoticed. And you know, we've had a lost decade of austerity and the value of pay for local government workers being slashed. So it is time for a decent pay increase that recognises the work that our members do and begins the process of catching up on years of lost earnings. And that's why our claim, I think, is a reasonable claim. Now, we know that the situation and the funding situation in local government is serious. You know, we've led the way, I think, in campaigning for more funding from central government. It's us who pointed out the £10 billion funding gap that councils faced last summer. And now we've launched our own website, we've launched our own materials to show exactly how much more every council needs. So you can go onto that and see what actually, what these cuts have meant in your individual council. So we're working hard to push for more funding for councils so that they can retain services and pay our members what they deserve. Last year, sadly, the Local Government Association, and Sean will know this as he's one of the lead negotiators, declined our offer to work jointly to lobby the government for more money for local government workers' pay. And that's just not good enough. That lack of seeing this as us having a common aim is just not good enough. And this year, councils need to step up to the mark and make it clear that their staff deserve a decent pay increase and that they should work with us to get that funding. Ultimately, local government employers know that they need to make a decent pay offer and that they need to start to engage in genuine negotiations with the unions. And I mean, it feels wrong at any time to be talking about the fact that they won't make us decent pay offers. But when you think back to what's happened during the past year, local government workers have absolutely shown how indispensable they are. And of course, it's always the NHS workers and care workers, many of whom, of course, are in local government, who get the headlines, and we see the fantastic work that they've been doing. But actually, it's also the work that people do. It's the people who've emptied the bins, and it's the people who buried their dead, and everything in between that are just as important. When you think of some of the jobs that our members do in local government, delivering food parcels to the most vulnerable people in society. And that was often what we saw this time round, was staff who, that wasn't their job. What we saw as local government went into lockdown was that many staff volunteered and were very flexible about agreeing to do different jobs across the council. And often councils were doing these things with no extra resources. So, housing all rough sleepers, for example, in the first lockdown with no extra resources to do this. Local government workers continuing to get into people's homes, despite the restrictions and despite the risks that face. For social workers and housing workers and a whole range of other people, there was no option because working from home just isn't possible. Other services have continued only as a result of workers accepting some level of personal risk. Refuse collectors often squashed together in a cab where we had to fight to make sure that there was protection put in place. School staff going in to continue to provide services for the children of key workers, whether that was in schools or in early years settings. And of course, people going in to look after vulnerable people at their home. And what about those workers who were involved in setting up local resilience forums with tasks like distributing PPE, protective equipment, to local care providers, or those involved in trying to deliver the test and trace support work, which would have been far more successful if it had been given to local government with the resources to do it than it was by completely wasting £37 billion by taking it out to the private sector. And it's kind of compare and contrast with what happened in vaccines, which is done by the public service, comparing it to track and trace, or those distributing loans and grants to local businesses that were struggling to survive. But what all of these workers, our members, have in common is a commitment to the public good, to being there when people need it, to getting us through this dreadful pandemic. And what's the reality now? Many are low paid. 44% of local government workers are part-time, and too many are paid way below the £10 an hour minimum wage rate. So our claim will actually help to get people to reach the £10 a minimum wage rate and the £9.50 an hour of the real living wage. So our claim is not unreasonable. It's not exorbitant. It's a decent claim. It's a well thought through claim, and one that we can justify. But more than this, it would also be a sign of appreciation for all the work that people have done, a sign of respect and recognition, and it could go some way towards helping to make up for the years and years of lost earnings. Because let's not forget, the Tories at Westminster have been in power for over 10 years, and we've had 10 years of austerity. And this isn't about setting one group of workers against another. Of course, it's tough in other sectors, and you will have family and friends and neighbours who've perhaps lost their job during this pandemic, or gone on to furlough and seen their pay cut, hours cut, or their conditions cut. But equity of misery is not an economic strategy. It's a political choice, and setting one group of workers against another is not a way to run a country. Decent pay isn't just morally right, it's economically right. Because what happens if you give our members a pay rise, if you give local government workers a pay rise? Well, let me tell you what they don't do with it. They don't go out and start buying up stocks and shares. They don't increase their housing portfolio. They spend their money in local shops and services. They buy shoes for their children. They go to local cafes and maybe even the local pub. They shop in the local butchers and bread shop or in the local supermarket. And that is how you rebuild the economy in this country. That is how you get shops and high streets back being active again, not by cutting the pay of public sector workers. So far from the greedy former prime ministers, the greedy football clubs, or the greedy industrialists, our claim is about fairness. It's about rewarding those who've cared for us and seen us through this pandemic. And it's about ensuring the quality of our public services for future generations. And just think about it, because whenever I see on TV that there's been a local crisis, we've had a few recently, an unexploded bomb, a major flood, a fire in a chemical plant where local communities get moved around. Who's always called out to help with that? When you think about it, who gets the call at midnight to say, oh, by the way, we're going to need you and teams of people to turn up to help out and look after these communities? I always know when I watch these things on TV, I know that at the heart of that, dealing with this crisis, will be our members, and those will be local government workers by and large, in there, getting their hands dirty, dealing with the crisis, looking after their local communities. And that's why, even although we clearly have a battle in our hands, it's absolutely essential that we're ready to fight that battle. We owe it to those working in councils and in schools, because we owe it to the people who depend on the crucial and critical services that you deliver. So we are up for a fight on this, and I want to say that we will work with you closely on this, and I hope that your event tonight goes well. Apologies for the fact that I can't stay. I'm actually on another call at 5:30, but thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak to you. And I'll hand back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks for those empowering words. I hope people will feel that help build their confidence as we need to. The next item on the agenda is just a brief outline of the claim itself, which Janine's going to do for us. So over to you, Janine.
Thank you very much, and I'll just share my screen. So hopefully everybody can see that, and I'm just going to quickly talk through the pay claim as it stands. So as Christina said, our pay claim is for an increase of at least 10% on all of the pay points for local government and school support staff. This was agreed via the UNISON NJC committee, and they consulted with branches earlier this year on what members wanted to see as the pay claim. And overwhelmingly across all the regions, 10% was the preferred pay claim to put into the local government association. And we are now waiting for a response. And we believe that response will come towards the beginning of May after the local government elections. So in terms of the context of the claim, and this will reiterate some of the things that Christina has just said. But why 10%? I might be hearing you ask if you weren't all on mute. But in March 2020, many of you will remember that the government promised to do whatever is necessary to support local authorities through the COVID crisis. Local government workers kept the country going through COVID-19. MPs joined celebrities, sports people, and members of the public on Thursday evenings, clapping key workers from their doorsteps. Then in February 2021, something changed. Rishi Sunak stood up in Parliament and told you that he was going to freeze public sector pay, that you didn't deserve a pay rise. And I just want you to think back at how that made you feel. Meanwhile, you've seen 25% of the value of your pay over the past decade wiped from the value of your pay over the past decade of savage cuts to local authority funding and earlier government imposed pay restraints. You are working harder and longer than ever before in the name of efficiencies. You have kept your communities going through the pandemic, facing risks to your and your loved ones' safety so that others were kept safe. You don't need more austerity. You deserve fair pay. So since 2010, as we've said, you've lost almost a quarter of the value of your pay against the cost of living. Many of you who are suffering from low pay are also those who've been on the front line dealing with COVID-19. And as Christina says, a 10% pay rise would bring our lowest paid members in local government to just above £10 an hour and above the real living wage outside of London. And that's been a long-standing priority for the union. But it's not a ridiculous claim. We're not greedy. We're not asking for the earth. Prices of everyday goods have been kept rising while your pay has kept falling. And that favourite comparator, the private sector, are now well ahead of your equivalent roles in local government. But it isn't just about pay. You've also suffered cuts to overtime, to sick pay, to enhancements for weekend working, bank holiday working. And the figures show that 28% of local government and school support staff work some unpaid overtime, compared to 15% of all employees. And certainly in the Southwest, my experience is that that 28% is probably a great deal higher. Compensating you for this unpaid overtime would actually require a 25% pay rise, but that's not what we're asking for. This year's pay claim is also supported by supplementary conditions claim that has gone in alongside the pay claim. But it's very certain that UNISON's focus is very much around the pay claim, and our fight is very much around pay. But how can it be afforded? I've also heard this question lots since we started talking to members about the pay claim. When the UK starts recovering from COVID-19, it cannot repeat the mistakes of 2010, when austerity delayed the UK's recovery from the 2008 financial crisis. Half of the financial cost of meeting our pay claim would be recovered by the government via increased taxes and reduced in-work benefits. And I think, thinking about those in-work benefits, I don't think anybody would expect that if you're working full-time, that you should also be having to claim benefits. And I think, all that does is give money into the bad employers. That money should be paid in your wages, not in benefits. And as Christina says, where do we spend our money? Do we stick our money in an offshore account? No, of course we don't. We spend our wages in the local community, in the food shops, the markets, the pubs now that they're reopened, the local cinema, creating local jobs and kickstarting the economic recovery at local level. Pay freezes don't save jobs. We have seen thousands of jobs cut across local government as services have been pared back to the statutory minimums. Our care services are in crisis, our schools are cramped and falling apart, and you have told us that you feel undervalued and unable to deliver the best service possible to your community. Workloads are impossible and mental ill health is on the increase. Enough is enough. So in summary, local government workers, you have kept the country going during COVID-19 crisis. You don't need more austerity. You need the government to honour their promise to do whatever is necessary to support local authorities. Local government employers must join us in holding the government to their promise. And you deserve a decent and fair pay rise. We have some asks of you, and these will come through throughout this event this evening. Sign up for updates, be part of our campaign. Talk to your friends and to your work colleagues using the online resources to promote the campaign, and we'll provide you with the links for those. We have lots of branches putting in motions to their local councils, and we would really like you to support that. So email your local councillor, find out what they think about our claim and publicise that. Let your branch know what response you got, because we'll be using that in our publicity. And finally, update your details at My UNISON so that we can ensure that we keep in touch with you throughout this campaign. So finally, I just asked you to stay strong and stay together. And I believe this is a fight we can win. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Thanks, Janine. And thank you for managing to wrap up what is actually quite a complicated pay claim in less than half an hour, probably significantly less than it would have taken me to do. So thank you for that. Our next speakers are your two NJC reps for the Southwest region, Amanda and Zoe, who are going to put some context around the impact of the claim on the Southwest region.
Oh, Amanda, shall I? We didn't rehearse who was going to go first, so
you carry on and I'll come in after.
So. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, Amanda and I, your regional reps on the NJC, and we're very passionate about the claim, and really felt that a pay rally such as this today was a way of getting members to understand the pay claim and share some of our passion, because as Janine said, we really think it's something worth fighting, but unless we have all our members behind it, then it's a hard it's going to be a struggle. We've seen the impact of the pay on our lowest paid members of our branches, but not perhaps just low paid workers. Although I'm not an official young member, I've aged out now, I still deem myself as a younger member of staff, a younger member of UNISON, and I'm hit with the millennial problem of not being able to move out of my house, out of the family home. I live with my parents, and a pay rise for me would be huge, because it would mean I would get that independence and move out, and which is fantastic. I think at 30 years old, I'm ready to do that, but without the finances behind me, I can't do that. So everybody will have their story. Everybody will be able to say why this 10% and what this 10% means to them. I would ask as an encouragement is that get members, our members, to tell those stories and tell your branches and why that 10%, what that 10% means to you. What would you be able to do with that? So that would be an ask from us. Amanda.
Wrong button, sorry. I just will add a bit to that in a sort of more local context. For us in Dorset, particularly in the Weymouth, Portland, Dorchester area, it's one of the highest areas of deprivation in the country. And because it is beautiful and it's on the coast, we have a lot of people retiring here and buying up second homes and all that. So our costs for housing are very high here, and we don't have a very good transport network, so people are reliant on their own vehicles a lot of the time. The infrastructures are not there in rural areas, and I think that's probably similar for some of the other areas in the Southwest. Excuse me. Certainly we asked all branches to get the information out as one of our asks, as Zoe and Janine have said about contacting your local councillors. Sadly, we've had one response to all of our letters out to our local councillors, and that's from Stella Jones in our area, which is pretty shocking. Even if you got the rejections and the backlash from them not wanting to pay it, but or support it, you would expect a little bit more coming back. But we'll keep on to that, and we'll go back and say, hang on a minute, where's our response? decent thing to do would be to respond to that. We've got a big part to play, all of us here today. You know, go out, talk to your fellow members and get them to participate, get them talking about it with other people. You know, if people are not convinced about how it can be afforded, you've got the answers today. You know, attend the meetings. Don't make them so much as a hard task. You know, it can develop into something that can also be lighthearted and you know, put a spring in people's step if they think, you know, actually you might be able to keep the heating on for a bit longer, especially when you're working from home, because you might have a bit more money in your pocket, or you might eventually be able to travel to see somebody you haven't seen for very long because you'll be able to afford the train fare. So and it's not just us. This pay rise issue is right across the board, and I think we have to stand in solidarity with our other trade unions and other sectors to make sure that they don't pick us off one by one, but to stand together. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe and Amanda. I think that's something that's often forgotten, is the actual effect, you know, on what is a relatively low wage area. And people make assumptions about regions such as the Southwest. I think that aren't actually true, and they forget that particularly housing costs are astronomical for the reasons you've said, because of the level of tourism and second homes. Our last speaker before we go into the question and answer session is Rafe, who's going to explain the context of the claim for schools which are now academies.
Thank you, Sean. Obviously, we've got some schools who are covered under local council agreements and LEA, or what used to be LEA, but they're council-run schools. But then we've also got the academies who sit outside of that. So really, how does the pay claim affect these academies? Some of you may be asking. Well, really, there's three main categories where it comes into it. There's those staff with a contractual right to NJC pay and terms. There's staff who meet what's called the conditioning test, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And then there's the staff in the academies who are neither of those above terms that I've just described. So I'll deal with the contractual rights first. We'll have many school staff and where they're covered with this pay claim as well, because they could well have a collective agreement in place. They've maybe signed a union recognition agreement, and they will say, we will follow whatever the terms and conditions are that are in there in the NJC pay awards. The other bit you've got is those staff in academies who meet the conditioning test. And this is one where there may not necessarily be a collective agreement, and there's a number of evidential tests that we then need to meet. One of those could be that where there's a term in an individual person's contract that entitles them to NJC pay awards outside of any 2P operation of where they moved out of the council and into the academy as an employer. They could also have entered into a collective agreement post a 2P transfer, and part of that agreement was setting out entitlement to NJC pay awards. And the third part of the conditioning test really is, I guess I would sum it up as almost custom and practice. And this is where an employer has habitually observed NJC pay awards. And so either since 2016 to 2021, they followed it, or 2018 to 20. And there's another positive indicator that they are going to follow NJC pay awards, whether that be a formal letter or even the minutes from a meeting. So those are sort of the elements that make up the conditioning test. And then the pay award would still meet to those. Well, we've also got those academies when none of that above meets. And really, UNISON have developed a model pay claim which can be used for, you know, if you're not part of a collective agreement or it's not part of the conditioning test meeting. And branches in the Southwest currently doing some mapping work to establish which academies have got NJC agreements and which don't. And if you're a school member, I would ask you to engage with your local branches. If you're one of those academies who are outside of the terms I've discussed, get in contact with your branch, and they're there to assist you in submitting a model pay claim. If we don't have that information at local branch, ask your employer, ask them for written confirmation of whether they will follow NJC terms or not, and then liaise with your local branch, and they're there to support you. We need all members to engage in this, and they'll be following national consultations, local consultations. There may be ballots to come. You know, we need everybody to get involved in this. And I guess my last bit on the involvement is, I'm a steward in a school. We need more people. We need more contacts. So if you are a school UNISON member, and after hearing the moral case that Christina has put forward, the financial case that Janine has put forward, and you say to yourself, yeah, I am worth £10 an hour. I'm worth more than that. Get yourself involved, get in contact with your local branch and say, yeah, I'm willing to act either as just a contact and direct people towards the branch, or I'm interested in becoming a steward. We need to grow. We need more people to be involved. Thank you. I'll hand you back, Sean.
Thanks, Rafe. And I think that last bit you said is probably the most important message anyone can take from tonight. Is obviously the union isn't 4 people, 10 people speaking tonight. It's 1.5 million people nearly around the country, and in local government hundreds of thousands. And the more people we can get active and involved, the more effective we will be in delivering a pay settlement that actually merits what we deserve. So we've concluded the formal business, and we're actually open to questions or contributions from people from the floor. So if you do want to speak, please just type into the chat so that I can be alerted to who you are, and then we can have you unmuted and we can introduce you. So I'm going to give people a moment to do that.
Sean, just while everybody's just taking the time to think of questions and type them, are you happy for me just to share the campaign video?
Oh yes, please. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna, so this is a short 20-second campaign video for the pay claim, and just a bit of an ask. Once I've shown it, we'll put the links to it, and if we can share it on social media, that would be really good. So just bear with me while I share the screen.
Can you hear the sound? That's it, very short, but if you can yeah, share it on social media, I'll share the links to everybody in the chat.
Thanks, Zoe. And yeah, it is quite short and snappy, and it's the kind of thing people get, I think, because it shows what we do on a daily basis. I think that's really important for members of the public to understand that people aren't actually just pen pushers and bureaucrats that work in local government. We do all sorts of amazing things on a daily basis. I'm not seeing any raised hands or questions in the chat yet. I'm wondering if everyone has nothing to say. I want to give that a couple more minutes because I'm sure there are.
Can I just, while people are thinking about that, also give you something else to ponder? We've been told that our real terms pay has fallen by 25% over the last 10 years. MPs' pay has risen by 16.6% over the last 10 years. So when they say we're all in this together, let's just have a think about that.
Sean, there's a question in the chat from Neil. Do you want to come in and ask it, Neil Guild?
Oh, I've muted myself. Yeah, it's just a really straightforward question, because I thank you for all the presentations that everybody's supplied. I was just kind of curious where we stood with the negotiation, because when it was last referenced, I understood that the employers had parked it until after the local elections that we were not very happy with that. I'm just sort of mindful that a lot of my members and the wider workforce at Somerset County Council, they just sort of go to sleep during a lot of this, and they just assume that it's all just going on in the background, and at some point later in the year, they'll just be told on their pay slip that they've got X amount in terms of the pay award. And I'm just quite conscious at the moment that, you know, we need to use this time that we've got now, while the employers are sort of parking it, to make that case with them and alert our members and the wider workforce in local government and schools that now's the time to start building for that campaign. So I just wonder where we were and when we expect them genuinely to get back to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil, and actually is a really valid point. Yeah, so as you said, we had expected them to have made an offer by now. They did then use the excuse of the upcoming elections and PERDA period not to have made an offer. We wrote back to them ourselves, GMB and Unite, to make clear we weren't happy with that, not least because our pay award is already 3 weeks overdue, being the 1st of April being our award date. We're expecting them to come back to us towards the end of May. That's what they've indicated, that there will be at least an initial offer and consultations throughout negotiations in the month of May. But I think what you've just said is really, really important, because actually we need to exercise the pressure, and your region, like my own region, and most of the regions in the country have got elections coming up. The people who make the decisions are up for election in many areas, whether they be mayors, whether they be local councillors. So it is more important than ever, I think, that people do exercise their pressure, because actually many local councillors get very little correspondence at all from, barring the usual kind of, I need time to deal with my landlord and my housing. So actually, if they get more than a half a dozen queries on something like local government pay, they start paying attention. That's the sort of advice we've been given. So I think it is really important that people use those tools that we mentioned earlier to exercise that pressure, whether that be their local councillor, whether that be their MP, whether that be candidates for mayoral elections where you've got them in the southwest. But yeah, and equally with members, we can't wait until we get an offer to try and mobilise them. They need to be empowered, angered, frankly, and reminded that they're worth it, that they're actually worth 10%, and that 10% is still only half of what they've lost in the last decade. And for those that have been working in local government, so I think it is really, it's a valid point you make, and it's one that we all bear a responsibility for in our branches and our regions, in our workplaces, to actually get people motivated, because we won't get 10% because we ask for it. We'll get 10% because they think they've got to give it to us, because we're serious about fighting for it.
Cool, thank you for that. I'm just on the election thing, I mean, I just will follow that up if that's okay. It's a really good point about that. These are the biggest set of elections we may get between now and 2024. Virtually every council in the southwest, is up for election. There's a huge number of elections taking place. We've also got some mayor elections up in Bristol, and also we have at least elections to police and crime commissions across the southwest as well. So it's a really good time to start influencing some of these councillors. So those new elected councillors will be part of making that decision on our pay awards. And now's the time. You've got elections in about 2 weeks now. It's the first week in May. So really use the opportunity to get hold of them and put them under pressure on where they stand on local government pay. I mean, I'm going out leafleting just after this, so it is live campaign happening at the moment. So make the most of it.
Thanks, Neil. Couple of comments in the chat I can see. In terms of the question about the standard letters for MPs, yes, they are coming. As was mentioned in the presentation, we've been concentrating on councillors in the first instance, but there is a model letter for MPs. And apologies, I've missed enough comments dropped off. And yes, absolutely. Obviously, our pay restraint over the last decade has impacted on the value of people's pensions and their future pensions, and it's something worth raising with members, not least because, of course, just like their pay rise, if there's a pay freeze, they're stuck with it forever. It doesn't get remedied in a later year. So I think that is something worth raising with people. Unless I've missed them, I can't see any other questions yet, but I'm going to give it a moment. And if anyone does,
Sean, I was just going to say, I've shared the links that I keep sharing is the campaign page. So just to let you know on there that you've got the email your council at all. So even perhaps if you haven't contacted your, you could maybe use that a model to contact your MP as well. There's the links to the video I've just shared, and just some other bits and pieces.
We've got a question from Steve Riles, who's put his hand up.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Good evening, everybody. It's not so much a question as, well, I suppose it is really. I've had a number of queries off members recently asking if they're getting the £1,000 that was announced for all workers earned under £24,000. And having looked, clearly it isn't government, it isn't local government workers, as I understand it. It's more to do with the civil service and people like dentists and all that kind of stuff. A, could you confirm that's correct? And B, if so, can we put something out to say, look, you're not automatically getting the £1,000, please?
Yeah,
Thank
Steve. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the question. Yeah, it is unfortunately correct.
Yeah.
Central government have this habit of making announcements and saying public sector workers and ignoring the fact that they don't actually pay our, well, they do pay us, but they don't control our pay. I think it is something we need to pick up. People will remember some years ago when the previous government announced £250 during the pay freeze, and lots of local government workers didn't get that either because we weren't deemed to. They like to talk about the pay restraint in public sector when it suits them, i.e. when there is one, but they don't like to give us the money when something else has been proposed. So we'll pick that up. Amanda, go ahead.
You know what it's like when you have something in your head and then suddenly it disappears. That's just what's happened to me. But one thing I did want to say is, you know, obviously when we get nearer to the time when we have an offer on the table, it's absolutely crucial that people use their vote. You know, all too often we don't get people voting, and it's a really important thing, whether you agree or whether you don't agree, whatever the election is, you know, please do vote, because then at least it's a truer democratic process.
Thanks. No, I think it is. Again, it's just the same as with using your vote in an election in general. It is important that people actually have their say. You're a member of the union. We negotiate your pay. But actually the decision rests with the members when we get an offer. And although last time the turnout was slightly better, it was around about 18-19%. That's still 18 or 19%. It's not even a fifth of the members who could vote. The other thing I was going to mention is of course the campaign itself is an opportunity to recruit and members and stewards anyway, because obviously it's something visible that the union do for them. But what I think we need to emphasise to members is, it's not about what we do for you, it's what we do with you and what you can do as a union member. I think it really is. There's a very big distinction in that, because we can write all the detailed analysis on and saying our pay is just, but ultimately it's our members who will participate. I can see a question from Victoria. Did you want to come in, Victoria, or did you want me just to pick that question up or ask one of the panelists too? Thanks. Okay, so the question is, what are we going to do about the so-called award for low-paid staff? Let us take that back, Victoria. As I say, it's not normally been the case that anything they announce centrally affects local government, but obviously it's something that we would, aside from anything else, we'll be picking up as part of the negotiations on pay, because we would expect no less favourable than other for our low-paid workers than other low-paid workers in say the civil service or in the health service. And I think it is. As I say, it's an unfortunate habit that's been happening. Things are awarded and then they forget about, well, in particular, they actually forget about schools in terms of low paid staff, but there are obviously lots of other low paid staff in local government, so we'll pick it up. Leslie, I can see a question. Did you want to come in, or did you want us just to pick that one up?
Everybody, hello Sean, thank you. Yeah, I mean, every time we've had any pay increase in the past, then unless that school budget share is increased from central government or the Dorset Council, you know, you find you get non-teaching staff redundancies, and that seems to be not quite the way we meant it to happen. You know, you want everybody to still be employed, which is premise behind the thing, that everybody's got a job still.
It is. I mean, it is a real problem, and I know even in the borough I work in, same situation arose last year and the year before when we got a pay rise, and that's why part of our campaign is not just about getting a pay rise; it's about getting a funded pay rise. Just like the teachers managed to get last year, where their pay increase was funded. In fact, any increase in their pension contributions was funded centrally, so they didn't suffer a detriment from getting a pay rise. So it is something that we absolutely need to keep pushing on. And I don't know about in parts of the southwest, but I know certainly in our region, one of the other issues is not just about school funding; it's about falling pupil numbers, and obviously that has an impact on school funding as well. So it's causing real issues for redundancies in our in regions.
Also, Sean, if we have a pay rise, then that means there's more cost for our own costs, for national insurance and pension, which is why support staff have 25% on costs on top of what we actually, take home, and we're deemed as an expensive item compared to a teacher. So,
Sean, can I answer as well, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we recognise that Leslie, it's Janine here, and but the other side of that is, as I said in my presentation, pay freezes didn't solve that problem either. So not having a pay rise isn't actually going to solve the funding crisis either in local government or for our schools, unfortunately. In the southwest, I get almost weekly emails from multi-academy trusts talking about restructures and redundancies because of financial situations. And it isn't our staff and our members' fault. It's not your fault that you deserve a decent pay rise. It's the government's issue in not funding schools properly. So I think that's a really important point. If you're going to be lobbying your MP, is lobbying for the funding, and it's about what's decent and what's fair in terms of your pay. And as I said, not taking a pay rise would not save people's jobs, and it hasn't done over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I accept that. It's the money coming from government going in the right pot, isn't it? That's the school pot. So that's what we're there to try and support. Okay, thank you.
I would totally echo that. And, within Dorset, Leslie, you'll probably know, because you're one of our reps, that we are still inundated with redundancies and even school closures at the moment. So it doesn't ever stop. So we have to battle on and get what our members deserve.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Zoe, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to, I think it's really good to actually bring in now that we, along with the pay campaign, there is also a national UNISON campaign, the Save Our Services campaign. And I think I think the two are very interlinked, and I think one without the other, we're going to struggle. So the Save Our Services campaign is about exactly that, the pay gap, and making sure that that's addressed. But in order to do that campaign and to do that, we as a region, we as branches, we need members to tell their stories, because what we're finding is that local government workers are so underappreciated, undervalued. Amazingly, I think even ourselves, I think we undervalue ourselves and perhaps don't appreciate the work that we do and what we provide in society. So we are asking for members to come forward and to tell their story, to say, I'm a local government worker and this is what I do, and then hopefully that will, we can bring that into a campaign. And I think over the next few weeks there's some national people coming out, I think, telling their story. So again, just get involved with your branch and the Save Our Services campaign.
Thanks, Zoe. I mean, I think that message is really important, because, as I said earlier, people need to hear from what I'd call real people, if that makes sense, i.e. people that do, on a daily basis, deliver for residents and service users. Janine, did you want to just pick that point up, just in case people haven't seen it in the chat?
Yeah, as part of our Save Our Services linking to the pay campaign, South West Region are actually putting on a training event on the 19th of May. And I can put the links, I haven't got the link with me, but I'll be emailing everybody after this, and I can put the link in that email for people to register to that. So it's a training session which will sort of work you through a way of telling your story. So it'll give you confidence to either tell that story in your branch or to your MP or to your councillor or on social media. So if anybody's, you know, a little bit worried about, oh, well, nobody wants to hear about me or what I do, I don't really know how to do that, then, you know, please sign up and come along to that training. It will be really good.
I'm struggling to find the raising hand thing. I just wanted to say that.
Go ahead, Florence. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I really like that idea that you've just mentioned. So it's fantastic, and I think that if real stories are told, it resonates with many people. And you know, if you're looking for someone to join forces in that, I'll be, you know, willing to work with you on that. That just got me really excited, and I think it's a fantastic idea.
That's really great to hear. And I think we're also, from a Somerset point of view, we're the 5 branches in the local government branches in Somerset are working together, and we're looking at really different ways of how we can engage with those. So we may do videos rather than just a written piece. So yeah, Florence, either get in contact with me or you know, your branch, and we'll talk about it from a regional point of view. So
yeah, because I feel a lot of people feel that, you know, when these sort of campaigns happen, they don't feel that they're being listened to. But if it's a real story that is coming from someone who is experienced and someone who would say, oh, okay, I can relate to that, that has happened to me, I think that is fantastic. So I think people will start to think that, okay, finally someone is actually listening to us.
Yeah, Florence, you may have missed it. Obviously you're in our branch and we've put a call out and we've got some people starting to do those little videos. So yeah, speak to me and we can sort that. That'd be great.
Brilliant, brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Are there anyone else who wants to make a contribution or ask a question? If not, I'm going to ask the panelists to make any closing remarks that they want to highlight. Okay, go ahead.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda, yeah. I'm just looking at too many people on my screen and trying to find the panelists momentarily.
Yeah, I think the important message is keep talking, keep in touch, you know, keep up to date. We'll certainly, Zoe and I from the National Committee will keep you updated. You know, talk to your members, and those people that are not members, get them signed up, because they won't get a vote on it unless they are a member. So it would be really good to get more members and more activists out of this. Thank you. Thanks.
Zoe?
Yeah, no, same, you know, same thing is just to, you know, we're not going to get the 38 of us on this call aren't going to get the 10% pay increase. We need to do it as a collective. So it is about pulling together. And we had a meeting, a regional meeting with where Glenn, our national chair for the local government services exec, said something really interesting, which I'm just going to quote him, and he said, we can't have members of the public clapping on for us on a Thursday and slapping us on payday. So I think I just want to end on that.
Yeah, he's got a wonderful way with words as our Glenn, I must admit. Janine?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. I think I'd like to end on what Zoe said, to be honest. So yeah, just keep in touch, speak to everybody, and yeah, let's not let them slap us on payday, eh? We deserve it.
And Rafe, anything you wanted to add?
I think that is a very good summary and a very good strapline. It's certainly one I'm going to be taking away. So thank you, Zoe. I'm also going to be taking away Christina's comment about misery equity. I think somebody else commented about in the chat. I think that was a very powerful presentation and speech from her. And I'd just like to thank everybody else, my fellow panel colleagues. It's been a really enjoyable session, and I think a really meaningful one. let's not get angry, but let's get really fired up and support this pay claim. So talk to everybody, involve everybody, and if you want to get more involved with your branch, please do. Please take this, because it is about us as members. We are a member-led union. It's going to come from us.
Thanks all. And I don't think there's anything more I can add other than keep going, get busy, get active. And yes, every one of us can do something that will make a difference to make this claim a reality. Every one of us can speak to one person who can speak to another person. That's how we spread the word. That's how we organise. And particularly probably at the moment where many of us are sitting behind screens and stuff, use some of the social media and some of the options that are available to you to actually communicate with people. And that little 20-second video, absolutely, if you're on Twitter, Facebook, wherever, put it up, share it, get the message out there that we are 10%, we're worth every penny of it. Unless there's anything else anyone wants to say, I'm going to suggest we wrap up there and wish everyone be safe out there, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Before everybody leaves, Sean, thank you very much for chairing today. Thank you for stepping in for that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all the panel, actually. Yeah, thanks very much. And Mark.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.